Have you ever wondered how a single piece of legislation could quietly chip away at our freedoms for generations? And what if that same law is on the verge of being dismantled by a bold new measure in Congress? In this video, we'll talk about how the NFA might be one step closer to crumbling, thanks to the Stop Harassing Owners of Rifles Today Act, better known as the SHORT Act. The NFA has been on the books since 1934, born out of a climate where lawmakers claimed they needed to clamp down on gang violence. Ever since, it's been used to control various firearms through taxes, registrations, and waiting periods. Many of us see it as an affront to the Second Amendment, a constant reminder that the federal government can dictate how we use and own firearms if we let them. Over the years, the scope of this law has expanded beyond what many believe the framers of the Constitution ever intended. It started by restricting machine guns, short-barreled rifles, and short-barreled shotguns through a hefty tax and registration process. Then, through ongoing reinterpretations by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, it spiraled into a tangle of complicated regulations that have made it risky for ordinary citizens to exercise a fundamental right. Not too long ago, the ATF decided that firearms equipped with stabilizing braces, previously understood to be pistols, suddenly qualify as short-barreled rifles. The effect was a massive shift. We either had to register these items with the federal government or face felony charges. The idea that a simple brace could flip your status from law-abiding citizen to felon overnight reveals just how intrusive federal control has become. Instead of a consistent rule of law passed by elected officials, the NFA has operated like a living document for the ATF to reinterpret at will. The timing of the reclassification seems tied to broader attempts at imposing new regulations on firearms whenever possible. That's why the introduction of the SHORT Act is a game-changer. It's poised to disrupt this arrangement and give lawful owners a much-needed reprieve from endless red tape and fees. The SHORT Act isn't just a minor tweak to gun laws. Introduced by Senator Roger Marshall of Kansas and Representative Andrew Clyde of Georgia, it aims to erase the requirement that short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and related firearms register under the NFA. In a more practical sense, this would end the bizarre scenario where the length of your barrel or the presence of a stabilizing brace could force you to jump through hurdles to prove you're not a criminal. Many of us have argued that such rules do nothing to prevent real crime or violence. Instead, they just turn honest gun owners into targets for prosecution over technical details. The name Stop Harassing Owners of Rifles Today speaks volumes about the motivation behind this legislation. We're tired of seeing fellow citizens forced into a bureaucratic labyrinth for simply owning or building firearms that have barrels shorter than some arbitrary standard. When the founders wrote the Constitution, they never intended an alphabet agency to impose taxes on a core right. The SHORT Act is about removing layers of federal control and returning power to individuals and communities. If it passes, the bill does 5 major things. First, it erases short-barreled rifles and shotguns from the NFA's definition of firearms. That means no more $200 tax stamps, no more months-long waiting for approval to buy, transfer, or build a perfectly legitimate piece of hardware. Second, it amends the tax code accordingly, so there wouldn't be hidden fees or extra charges tied to these firearms. Right now, if you have a short-barreled rifle, you're expected to pay significant fees, wait for processing, and hope your paperwork is in perfect order. This bill aims to end that arrangement. Third, it prevents the federal government from classifying these types of guns as destructive devices. That phrase, destructive device, has been tossed around as a catch-all category that the ATF uses to justify all kinds of intrusive regulations. By removing SBRs and SBSs from that label, the SHORT Act cuts off another avenue of potential abuse. Fourth, it demands that the Attorney General destroy all existing NFA records related to these firearms. No more names or addresses stored away somewhere so bureaucrats can track your possessions. If you believe in individual liberty, seeing these records shredded and purged from government databases is a breath of fresh air. And last, but definitely not the least, and this is something a lot of folks overlook, is that it stops state and local governments from layering on their own taxes or registries if federal law no longer treats these firearms as NFA items. We know some states are more prone to follow the federal government's lead in restricting gun rights. The SHORT Act would prohibit them from imposing their own parallel systems, provided the federal standard no longer recognizes these weapons as restricted. The GOA and NFA, among others, are fully behind this bill. Yeah, there's controversy with the NFA, but they've long worked to protect the Second Amendment from federal overreach. They've watched the ATF's attempts to clamp down on things like pistol braces and concluded that enough is enough. This new bill represents a meaningful move, as it will restore freedoms that should never have been curtailed in the first place. It also signals a readiness among certain lawmakers to stand up and say, hey, we see the ATF overstepping its bounds, and we're not going to let that slide. It's important to note that the House could potentially pass this legislation if Republican representatives stick together. Where things get complicated is in the Senate. Bills need 60 votes to pass the Senate without being blocked, and that means getting several Democrats or independents to cross the aisle. Is it a challenge? Absolutely. Is it impossible? Not necessarily. If we can create enough pressure from constituents who make it clear that overreaching gun laws hurt everyday people and don't actually reduce violent crime, there's always a chance for change. After all, even the most resistant legislators might shift if their voters are loud enough. What do you think? And how do you feel about the government collecting data on law-abiding citizens for simply owning a rifle with a specific length? Sound off in the comments section below. It's important that we keep these discussions alive. When we speak up together, we can affect how our representatives view this issue. Looking at the bigger picture, the SHORT Act is more than a narrow fix for SBRs and SBSs. It's a step toward chipping away at the notion that the NFA should remain untouched. For decades, the NFA has been used as a foundation for all sorts of gun control measures. The time spent waiting for forms, the money lost to tax stamps, and the invasive background checks are just a part of the daily reality for people who want to lawfully exercise their rights. And it doesn't stop there. Once a regulatory framework exists, it's often expanded to include suppressors, braces, and other accessories that the government decides it doesn't trust in private hands. If the SHORT Act gains enough momentum, it sends a clear message to the ATF. Your ability to create felons out of thin air will be curtailed. It also shows the public that laws undermining the Second Amendment can, in fact, be reversed. This measure is directed at short-barreled firearms, but the precedent it sets could challenge other aspects of the NFA. It sparks hope that one day we'll see more efforts to roll back regulations that serve more as inconvenience than genuine safety measures. Some folks might argue that these steps are unrealistic in a climate where politicians push for expanded gun control. However, every piece of legislation starts with a single idea and the determination of those who champion it. One reason I feel encouraged about the push for the SHORT Act is the growing grassroots anger over the ATF's broadening definitions. The pistol brace fiasco is fresh in everyone's mind. Gun owners who followed the rules suddenly found themselves in a bind. Either register or be deemed a criminal. That kind of heavy-handed approach galvanized many people who might have otherwise assumed the federal government was staying within its limits. Now, those folks are calling representatives, joining Pro-2A organizations, and saying, we will not stand by while our rights are reclassified. If lawmakers see a significant wave of public input, especially in key states, they might realize that supporting the SHORT Act could be beneficial, not just constitutionally but politically. While we're on the topic of activism, I want to mention something meaningful happening on April 19th in Massachusetts. I'll be heading there to participate in an event commemorating the 250th anniversary of the first shots fired in the American Revolution at Lexington and Concord. Gun Owners Action League, often referred to as GOAL, is hosting a fundraiser at the Boxborough Regency Hotel. They're not only celebrating a pivotal moment in American history, but also actively suing officials in Massachusetts over restrictive gun laws. It's a perfect example of what happens when local organizations and individuals come together to defend and celebrate our heritage of liberty. If you're in the region or can make the trip, it's a chance to learn, network, and support GOAL's legal battles on behalf of gun owners. There's a direct line between honoring the courage of those who fought for our independence 250 years ago and challenging unconstitutional restrictions today. Sometimes people ask me, why keep pushing back against the NFA? Isn't it just a minor inconvenience? My response is that any infringement on a fundamental right should be taken seriously. History is full of cautionary tales. Let one intrusion slide, and it opens the door to another, then another. Eventually, you find yourself playing defense on rights that should never have been negotiable. The debate isn't about letting criminals run wild. It's about ensuring that law-abiding individuals aren't treated as criminals for peacefully owning firearms. That distinction is often lost in the noise, but it's central to everything we're discussing here. The Second Amendment is not a mere policy preference. It's a core principle. It secures our ability to defend ourselves, our families, and our communities. It also serves as a check against the possibility of governmental overreach. Laws like the NFA tip the balance by putting too much decision-making power in the hands of unelected officials who can interpret and reinterpret those regulations however they wish. That's a recipe for abuse, and we've seen it time and again. Whether it's waiting for months to get approval for something as simple as adding a barrel a few inches shorter, or learning that a brace you've owned for years is suddenly reclassified, it all points to a system that's become unmoored from the original meaning of the Constitution. If the Short Act succeeds, it will invigorate pro-2A lawmakers to propose similar dismantling of outdated or oppressive gun control laws. This could be the snowball that grows, ultimately calling into question whether the entire NFA deserves to remain in place. While some believe we should focus on more incremental changes, there's merit in swinging for the fences when the moment demands it. Enough people are exasperated with the way the NFA disrupts their personal freedoms, so bold action has a chance to resonate. After all, what's really at stake? Is it about putting guns in the hands of people who shouldn't have them? Of course not. It's about acknowledging that citizens who follow the law and who want to own specific types of firearms for sport, collection, or personal defense shouldn't face federal intrusion that's rooted more in revenue collection than in genuine safety. We know criminals are not lining up to pay taxes and register their guns. The biggest impact of the NFA is on regular folks who want to do things the right way. The criminals, by definition, don't care about compliance. But the same big question remains. Can we muster enough grassroots energy and legislative support to get the Short Act across the finish line? Doing so would require intense pressure on the Senate. House passage might not be the tallest hurdle, but the Senate is where many good bills have gone to die. That's precisely why each of us has a responsibility to make our voices heard. No bill is guaranteed to succeed, but putting it on lawmakers' radars while letting them know we won't accept more federal overreach can make a difference, both now and in future battles. I've had enough of these bureaucrats acting as if they can decide which parts of my constitutional rights apply this week and which might apply next week. What about you? Comment below, and please like, share, subscribe, and click on the bell icon for more of these videos. Thanks for watching.